everybody, and welcome again to another episode of the Risk Matrix podcast and videocast with myself, Dr. Martin, and James Junkin.
James Junkin, roll tide. It's so good to be here on the Risk Matrix, where we talk about all things risk and bringing those workers home safe from high hazard jobs.
So welcome today, and today we have with us Doug Castro. So welcome, Doug.
Hey, thanks for having me, y'all. I appreciate it.
Doug is a CSP, CSSM, COSM, and he's the operations manager at Environmental Health Services, LLC. Doug has over 18 years of experience in workplace safety and risk management, leadership, and professional development. Among many services offered by Doug's firm, they develop training videos, computer-based training design, and conduct instructor-led courses. Doug is an EHS and leadership course developer and instructor. He's an NCCER master trainer and has trained hundreds of OSHA trainers. Doug has also developed test prep courses for several of the certifying bodies, including BCSP. So Doug, a member of our Veriforce Strategic Advisory Board, of which James is the chair. Welcome, Doug. And first I'm going to give it to James, and he's going to tell us a little bit about a little thing that Veriforce has coming up in the near future.
Doug, super glad to have you, Doug. Great friend. Hey, we got an event coming up in our neck of the woods, Doug. The Risk Matrix podcast, powered by Veriforce, is on the move. We are headed to the Veriforce Select Client event in NOLA, May 15th and 16th, and we'll be broadcasting live from that event at the historic Higgins Hotel across the street from the World War II Museum. So, hey, let the good times roll, baby. We're going to have live guests and audience participation. Now, this show, the Risk Matrix, risk come in all different forms, and we'll be welcoming back Brent Kellerkamp, an attorney with the law firm Ogletree and Deakins, to discuss risk around cybersecurity. If you're a member of the Veriforce Network, check your inboxes for the in-person invitation for the May 2024 Veriforce NOLA Select Client Series event. Got some great speakers that are going to be there, including myself, Dr. Martin virtually, Brent Kellerkamp, for a live filming of the Risk Matrix. And for those of you that can't make the live event, as always, the podcast will be on YouTube and on Spotify. Welcome, Doug. You're in the Matrix, baby.
Hey, thank you both. Thank you, Dr. Martin. Thank you, James. Appreciate it. And James, I'd agree with the Client Select Series for Veriforce. I've been to a few of them. I think they're extremely informative, and they're great for networking too. So I absolutely recommend anybody who can make it live. And if not, at least catch it pre-recorded.
Well, absolutely, man. I enjoy it. It's a chance for me to sit in the audience and do less talking and more speaking, less speaking and more listening. It's how we learn, right? But
yeah,
we wanted to have you on, Doug, because I think all of us as safety professionals get asked this question all the time, whether it's messaging on LinkedIn or emails or text message. I get it one time a week. I get it 15 times a week. And that's, hey, I want to get some type of designation, some type of safety certification, whether it's ASP or CHST or CSP or whatever, and you certainly offer courses, and you offer tips on your YouTube channel that are free for people to go to and on how to prepare for these courses. What do you recommend for those individuals that are out there that are looking to add some designation, to take some test that verifies their knowledge, skills, and abilities, right, to add those letters behind their name? What should they do?
Absolutely. Great question, James. So in my opinion, first of all, there's so much training out there, right? I mean, I get a lot of people that call and ask what training they should take, what training is good training, what training is not good training. And this is my opinion. All training is good training. It doesn't matter what it is. Even if it's poorly trained, it's good training, because we learn, even sometimes it's what we don't want to do, right? Or how we want to handle ourselves, or whatever the case is. And oftentimes it's educational, I think, from the people that are in the training with us. What I've found is over the last, I don't know, let's call it the last handful of years, the ones that have been biggest training and trending, obviously, Veriforce, right? The master trainer for Veriforce, Safe Land. Also, in addition to that, is the Cost M, NCCER, the CSST for safety training as well. But the biggest one these days that I'm finding is more for the board of certified safety professionals. And looking in their database, which is open to everyone, you can see the number of certificates now or certified personnel now. It's a little bit over 66,000, which is, if you think about it, that's massive, right? So, so I think that the biggest trending now is the board of certified safety professionals, namely, like if you have a degree, your ASP and then your CSP. If you don't have a college degree, and then perhaps your CHST and maybe your SMS, your safety management specialist, all the way down to the CIT now, right? To the certified instructional trainer as well. So I think that the BCSP has got a great offering. I think maybe to clear up a few things is that some people think that it's training and it's not, right? I think the three of us, and either of you, please feel free to correct any of this if you want, but it's all testing. Okay,
Right,
it's knowledge
right.
and skill testing, right? And
We
it's
used to get a
standardized.
lot. We used to get a lot, Doug. I belong to the BCSP, right?
Mhm.
After people took an exam, they said, I belong to the BCSP. You didn't belong to the BCSP. You've earned a credential from the organization. You don't belong. You pay to have that credential once you've tested. You belong to things like American Society of Safety Professionals
Yep.
or the American Industrial Hygiene Association or ACGIH or one of the membership organizations. BCSP is not a membership organization. It's actually a credentialing body per se. So I mean that's a really good distinction there. Is it's a test that you're going to take.
That's a great point, because now that you say that, I have heard many people say that, and I just hadn't really thought about it that way. But you're absolutely correct. And that's perfect, right? And that's a perfect example. I think the biggest thing, Dr. Martin, is that that's what it is that many people in our industry don't know, aren't familiar with who the larger acronyms are, let's say, or more recognized acronyms, right? Because there's several of them. There are hundreds, or let's say, dozens, well into 100 or 200 different acronyms or training courses out there. But I think that the biggest thing when people call, and I think most of us are the same way, right? Someone we know got credentialed in something, right? Either we got certificated, got credentialed, or got certified. And we often tend to follow in other people's paths because they've cut part of the way already. And many times it's people that are influential in our professional development or our personal lives, but also that we're trying to get to the next step, whether it's on the supervision side of operations or whether it's on the safety side. I will share this, James. Like I said, is I think that the biggest confusion is people that say that I don't have a college degree. Let's call it a bachelor, because there's that exception for the ASP for the associate's degree with 12 hours of college credit in safety, right, or environmental health and safety. But I think the biggest question that I find is this, and maybe we'll start from here, is let's talk about maybe like a frontline supervisor, first of all, in construction, right? Either the STSC, like the safety training supervisor for construction, or just the STS for like a general industry, is a perfect example of a great entry point. Also, certified instructional trainer, people who have trained at least 135 hours, whether it's virtual and or online or program development, and all these parameters and all these requirements on the BCSP's website. Then non-degreed, the OSHT or the CHST, the numbers on, because I usually pull the number of certificates for each one about once or twice a year. The number of CHSTs as opposed to OSHTs is about, it's a little over 10,000 CHSTs to not even 2,000 OSHTs. So it's more for construction related, I'm convinced, than for general industry, just like the OSHA 510 or 511, right? Because I didn't want to leave those out earlier, and I accidentally left them out. But so I find that it's more related to the construction field, but that's all construction. It's not just oil and gas, right? It's also construction of healthcare, data tech centers. I've got somebody right now that was recently working at Walmart headquarters, okay, that's prepping for some of these exams. So it comes from all different industries that I find. I had someone that I trained a couple years ago, and the term that he and I stumbled upon was life science construction. And if you Google life science construction, you'll find companies like Clark or DPR, a lot of larger national contractors, and especially that are particularly government and military contractors. And then also contractors to like a lot of, let's say, to the semiconductor industry, right? Or to a lot of the social media construction going on for their data centers now. So those are, like I said, so I'm sorry, James, go ahead.
So I guess what you're saying is, as a professional, you need to think about what certification and what certification body fits your needs. Like, I didn't start off with taking a bunch of tests. I started off with taking a bunch of classes, and you know, I'm proud of all my designations. But the one when I first got in safety that I really wanted to get, and you had to go to a lot of classes for, and Doug, you taught some of those classes, was my COSHO.
Yeah, your CSHO, exactly.
My CSHO. And that involved training. And there are tests associated with that course, but they teach you that material in the course and you test during that course like you would any normal class. So
and that's a certificate
it's a
versus a
certificate.
certification,
Right.
Yeah.
right? So there's a
Right.
there's a designation between that.
I've still got a
too.
plaque. I've still got a plaque.
Yeah.
My plaque. I love my plaque,
Yeah.
right? But I was very proud of that designation and or certificate or however you want to call it. Because it provided the training necessary for me to build on in my career to be able to take some of these other tests
Absolutely.
that verify my knowledge, skills, and abilities, right? So wherever you are in your career, I think whether it's the OSHA outreach centers or whether it's NASP, the National Association of Safety Professionals, or it's BCSP, there's probably a pathway for recognition for some type of credential, right?
Absolutely.
I've got a whole bunch of them I've kept over the years. You know, I got a CSP, an MSP, an SMS, an ASP, a COSHO. If they come up with something cool, I may take that and add it to my name. Now my LinkedIn name's this long.
Absolutely.
You know, Doug, and
you quit using some of them because it becomes so many, right? So absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
You have to
Dr.
start
Martin's
picking
got
and
the
choosing.
most. And I
Not-
like to hear her get introduced at these conferences and stuff, and they go on and go, and finally she's like, "It's enough. You got like 7 of them. We're good now."
Stop. So I've got a question, right? This is the $100 million question, right? Because and I think James gets this too, and I'm sure you do because you're in the business of providing some of this prep work. Somebody comes to you and they go, Doug, where do I start, right? So how do you map that path for them? Like what kind of questions do you ask people to map that path based on what they've done, what they're doing? I mean, because we all kind of coach people or mentor people differently. How do you do it?
You know, that's a great question. And I used to tell people start at the OSHA 30 hour and start working your way up. Okay, either OSHA classes, like James said, right? Like the 9, 10, 11 classes it takes to get your CSHO through some of the OSHA ed centers, or, you know, through Veriforce, right? Or through Alliance Safety Council or NCCER. However, and Dr. Martin, and you're right, is BCSP is all testing. So my biggest concern is this, is if I tell people start with training and work your way towards certification. The issue with it, I find, is that there are so many out there, nobody knows what they need. And I get that call a lot. And people say, what do I need? I'm like, it's the one you don't have. You know, it's always the one we don't have. So we're always
It's
getting
the one
another.
that's in the job ad
Absolutely.
that you can't lie that you have. Right?
Absolutely. And that's exactly where I'm going. It's always the one that we don't have. And then they're like glass panels, right? Or think about like karate, you know, like panels of wood, right? You break one and then there's another, and then there's another, and then there's another. So there's no silver bullet. I mean, it's going to be a constant breaking of panels or breaking of glass to always get one to the next level, or sometimes just to be more competitive.
Expensive.
Absolutely.
It's expensive.
Absolutely. And I've got some people that have passed the CHST, and I'm like, and I've got most people that even the ones that we haven't trained, because I get calls from people that sometimes just use our free materials off of YouTube coupled with other free materials that they find. And that's great, right? I'm glad they passed it. And then we have students that actually sign up for our prep courses. But the interesting thing is, this is what I tell anybody: if you took a safety class or any class, I don't care if it's leadership development, safety, project management, or safety certification, right? Like a BCSP certification, you should at least be able to name off 4, 5, 6, 7 different topics or domains that you're familiar with.
Okay.
And so I tell people, Dr. Martin, you have to know your resume, and on your resume, you should have an extract of some of your training listed on your resume.
Yeah. So I'm gonna quiz you here, because a lot of people don't follow this stuff. I think as much as you and James, because I know James has written questions for the exams. I used to serve on the board. But domains, let's talk about domains, right? How do you match up domains? Let's speak of that, with where you're looking for a certification, or which certification you're looking for, because where do you find that information? I guess that's the question is, and how do you know if you know that stuff in that domain?
That's a great question, and it's a loaded question, right? So since we're going back to the BCSP, right? So if anybody's watching, or when everybody watches this, anybody watches, they'll know that we're going back to the BCSP credentials. The domains, I find this is that rather than split it up into like communications or ethics, right, or environmental safety or environmental management or safety management, I prefer to do this. And I think this is where many of the people that we've trained, or even people that have found our videos online, have found success, is I call it a left side, right side test. Left side is more logical, right? We have to, let's say things like standards. Okay, it's not just OSHA standards, because these exams are also international. So it's more about ANSI, ASME, right?
ISO.
Even US ISO, thank you very much, ISO, right? And then even US standards, but more like NFPA or ASME, American Society of Mechanical Engineers. So I find that I tell people that if you took like the OSHA 510 or the OSHA 511, don't think that you're just going to walk in and take this exam and pass it, because it's very unlikely that you actually will, if that's how you're thinking.
Absolutely.
And so it's more about logic being, I tell people this, James, we have to know definition, and we have to know standard. And when I mean standard, I mean all industry standards, right? Or at least a general knowledge of them, of the related ones. I'm sorry, ISO, like Dr. Martin said, right? ANSI, NFPA, ASME, so a few of them in there. And then there's also the right side, which is reasoning. And the reason is more the implementation of the 7 core elements of a safety management system. So everything that we look at you have to have the logic or the content, right? So you have to know definition, especially, I tell people this, we always say EHS or SHE, right? Or HSE, environmental health and safety. I tell people you have to look at it as environmental, then health, then safety. But the problem is, most of us taking these exams are safety practitioners primarily, and not necessarily health or environmental. Right. So we're looking at it from the wrong perspective, Dr. Martin. And I used to be offended. If you listen to some of the older videos, I sound kind of offended on it, right? But I get it. I get the importance of it.
I'm going back to look at your older videos now.
We cut a lot of them, but look, I praise the BCSP. I think it's a great organization. I think it's great people. I think it's great intent. But like anything else, like my own work, there are flaws. There's certain flaws in the system, right? And I think a lot of times it's because we have the best of intentions. But I tell people this is environmental. It affects the whole world, our whole country, our whole community. This is health. It's our workforce. So environmental could be carbon emissions, right? Could be toxic gases released from an explosion or fire. And then
sustainability. Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Sustainability, ESG.
Yeah. You know what? Great. Sustainability, right? And then health. Now it's the health of our workforce. Now you see the billboards for mesothelioma or silicosis, right? Or PCBs, polychlorinated biphenyls, that used to be cancerous substances in the old transformers and light balances, right? So health hazards in the workplace, and then it's safety. And the reason is that's how we are normally impacted. Communities are impacted from from train derailments, right? Or from substandard emissions of chemical plants, let's say. Health, we can affect the whole workforce for decades at a time or for days at a time. And then safety, because normally when people in safety get injured or die, it's 1, 2, or 3. And I'm not minimizing that, but it's a fall. Our biggest number that we normally hear is in a confined space fatality, which is normally 3, right? It's normally 1, 2, 3, or 4, but it's the averages between 2 and 3 because of the would-be rescuers. But when you hear about silicosis or mesothelioma, right, or you hear about asbestosis, now we're talking about hundreds or thousands or hundreds of thousands, right? Or James, and then we're talking about environmental, like the BP oil spill, right? Or we're talking about the train derailment in, I'm sorry, I think, Palestine, right? Thank you. So now we're talking about massive communities. So that's why I always say it's environmental, then health, then safety. But the exams, most of the people that were taking the exams or that we need the most amount of help are safety practitioners.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So
I think that's a great analogy there of how to approach from a studying standpoint. You know, getting out, you need to be familiar with the regulations. But if all your experience is in the regulations and not with industry standards like ISOs, ANSI standards, TME, you know, those type things, that's a gap. So
Absolutely.
how would I go? Because, you know, there is a gazillion ANSI standards, there's a gazillion ISO standards. How do I focus my study rather than just going out and trying to buy every standard that's out there and memorize what's in the standard, which would be a very challenge for James Junkin from Alabama.
So let me just give one tip, and it's not just BCSP, right? It's all of the certifying bodies do this, right? They don't tell you what's on the test, but they tell you the general, and this is what I was getting at before, Doug, was they tell you the general domains. I believe NASP does this. I believe BCSP does this. I believe IHMM does this for the CHMM. Whatever they call themselves now, the Board of Global EHS Credentialing does the same thing. And you can actually go on each of these websites and you can look at the general areas of study for the exam, the general areas that the test is going to cover, right? And they will say international standards or whatever. And you can say, well, you know, hey, I'm pretty good at safety management systems, but boy, I have no idea what to study for ISO or ASME or ANSI or, you know, and I think correct me if I'm wrong, every single certifying body, almost every one of them does that, including my professional management, my project manager professional.
Yeah, absolutely.
Did the same thing, right? So I could see where I'm weak before I even start.
I absolutely agree with what you're saying, Dr. Martin. I just don't think that most of us approach it that way. So we send out the domain, right? We also direct people to where to find the domain. But when the domain tells you that you need to know, you know, the safety parameters of an excavation, right? Of permit required confined space, of hazardous material. What happens is it's so much information that it's overwhelming. And I think that since many of us these days, I know I do, we tend to learn more in micro learning. What happens is it's just too much. It's an overabundance of information. I think it's easier said than done for especially you, then James, than me, probably because that's probably the order of how much continuing education we've all done a lot, right? But you figure, with as far as you've gone at the collegiate level, right? James continues going on. I've got my bachelor's, but so what happens is I think it's a little bit easier for all of us to say that because I'm dealing with so many people, and not just with the CHST. We're dealing with a significant amount of people with the ASP and CSP prep, and so some of them have their graduate safety professional already from some of these qualified accredited programs, so they're skipping directly towards their CSP. And then I have many that, like me, my 4-year degree is in paralegal studies, right? So I had to take the ASP then the CSP. I had to suffer twice. And what happens is it's just overabundance of information. And in the end, it's about how the question's asked.
Yeah.
And so sometimes, and this is a big statement that I'm hearing, is that, and I get it, because I've been there with my ASP, CHST, CSP, and CIT, is sometimes you struggle to understand the question. But I think part of that is because the test committee, look, both of you, I know, I feel your pain. Don't get me wrong. I'll beat you up a little bit, right, on it, when it comes to our students, right? But I also understand, because the problem is, it comes back to the whole chicken and the egg. For testing integrity, you can't just write a simple question, because then people go share the answer. So what happens? You have to kind of write a question, and it's situational. It's not just about testing knowledge, but it's about testing skill. So when you don't have hands-on for skill, like filling out a hazardous waste manifest, right? Or filling out a job safety or task safety analysis. And then the only other thing you have is situational, which is on a test question. And that's a really big challenge and I feel for the people for the BSCSP, because I think that the people that are on these test writing committees, James, like you, I think that, y'all take it seriously. You want the best, but at the same time, here's part of the problem, is that the majority of the people that are on these boards have successfully completed these tests. Well, have successfully completed these tests, because they're right there. They have the credential to be on the test writing committee. And they also have the benefit of, if you put a test question out and you're explaining it to your peers after to justify why you made the answer, well, and then maybe you need to revisit that question, because we as test takers don't have the benefit to bounce that question off of somebody to get the same mindset.
What's supposed to be in all these different accrediting bodies when you create a test, what is the minimal knowledge a certification holder, right, needs to know in order to hold this credential, right? I may not have phrased it right. Here's some Alabama.
Minimally acceptable candidate.
Okay. Minimal accepted candidate. There's the word, right? So when I've taken, my stuff with NASP and SMS, and I'll say this is what I feel like I can say without getting a lot of trouble. Some of these designations, if you will, and the test are geared to more practical, everyday, general knowledge that you may use in a broad spectrum of safety as a safety generalist, right? When you get into some of the other ones that you mentioned, there's more theoretical questions. Doesn't mean there's no practical questions on that exam, but there's some theoretical questions that are on that exam. And so I would encourage people, if you're a really good field safety person and you've got some general knowledge around things like you talked about, fall protection, confined space, HAZCOM, that, get in your study habit of thinking about, hey, what do I know about ISO 45001?
Absolutely.
Okay, because ISO 45001 is an international safety management system, and you can almost guarantee there's going to be questions around safety management systems. Think about insurance, because if you're running a safety department, you've got to understand workers' comp. You got to understand experience modifiers. You have to understand a little bit about liability in the broader sense, right? And then when we're talking about training adult learning techniques, and you may be a great trainer, but how do you develop training? So what I tell people is read a lot. And if you've got some deficiencies, that will catch you up. Now, there's all sorts of test prep things that are out there, but I'm talking about stuff that you retain that make you a better professional down the road. Now, Doug, I know you get this question because I get it all the time. James, I'm terrible in math. Well, look, James terrible in math too. The only one I know that's good in math is CIH's, right? So I'll phone a friend if I've got to. But James, I'm terrible in math. There's no way I'm gonna pass this test. Why is all the math on there? Math scares me. I'm paranoid to the math. What do I need to do to get ready for some of the math questions that are going to appear on all, whether it's NASP or I haven't taken the CHMM, but I'm assuming there's some math on that as well. I would think, Dr.
Mhm.
Martin, I would think there's some on there. Definitely
Might
in
be.
the CIH exam and on CSP, MSP, some of that. There's math calculations. So how do I prepare for all that? Or did I just say, I'm out?
I tell people don't sweat the math. That's exactly what I tell them. So every person that we have test, and I don't think a person's told us no yet. We do a last minute prep before they test, as long as they tell us they're going to test. And we do a debrief after they test. This is the rule. I tell them, I don't want to know the questions. I don't want to know the answers. All I want to know is first of all, I want to know how many math questions did you have? And the normal number that I'm hearing for most tests, with the exception of the ASP, is anywhere from 3 to 8 questions in math. With the ASP, maybe 5 to 12, let's say. Regardless, that's anywhere from 2% to 5% of the test. Why would you invest an overabundance of time in 2 to 5% of the test? You should not invest the majority of your time there. You should invest the minority of your time there.
All right.
The next question I ask them is this: what content that we trained them helped them the most? What content we trained them they didn't see at all? Did they see anything, any topic new that we never even mentioned to them? So is there a definition that we need to strengthen up on? That's it. We respect the testing integrity for the organization. I feel that we're ethical and moral when it comes to our training. And in the end, giving someone the answer doesn't help anyone. So I want to know what content helped you the most, what content helped you the least, and did you see any new content that we just failed to show you? And that's it. And if you tell me, oh, well, I need to know about, and I'm just using an example here, right? Caterpillars becoming butterflies. Okay, well, then we're going to go do the research, and we're going to go to NIOSH, right? Or we're going to go to OSHA, or we're going to go to ISO, and we're going to figure out, what they're talking about with health hazards, or the benefits of caterpillars becoming butterflies, right? So that's why we do that, because we want to respect the process, and in the end, it doesn't help anybody to try to memorize a question, right? What I tell people, James, is this, though, is that, and you're absolutely right. I never really understood the term, you can't see the forest through the trees until now. When you're sitting in the forest, all you see is a few trees in front of you. You have to be elevated in a helicopter or a satellite, right, or the top of a very tall building to be able to actually get the appreciation of what the forest looks like. So what happens with these exams, in my opinion, is that most of us can't see the safety system through the field, because most people that are taking these exams still kick rocks, are still on their boots somewhere in this place on a regular basis. So all we see is what's in front of us day to day, as opposed to saying, hey, we have to be pulled up and look at the whole picture of a whole refinery, okay, or a whole construction site, right? And we have to be able to look at the whole operation system or safety management system of an organization, regardless of what craft that organization is in, and regardless of the size of it. That's why a safety management system works. It's a framework for all size companies in all industries. Okay, it's just a framework. Just like a vehicle. Vehicle only comes body on top of a frame, or unibody construction, meaning that the frame is built along with the whole body system in place. And you can drive a Versa or you can drive a Ferrari. They're built the same way, either body on frame or unibody construction. There's no other way to build a passenger vehicle. So what I tell people is this.
One goes faster than the other, though.
Absolutely, and more minimized, right? That's exactly it. That's exactly it. Dr. Martin said the same thing happens with a company. You have a 5-person company that does industrial plumbing, maybe site drainage, right? And maybe installing, bathrooms, or a sprinkler company maybe doing sprinklers. Or do you have one of these major contractors that we all know aware of that have tens of thousands, if not 100,000 employees? So, but a safety management system works for all. And this is what I share with people, James. And I think this is the best value. When in doubt, when taking a question or preparing for this exam, You have to look macro, not micro. You have to look at more safety management systems, like you said, more breaking down ISO 45001, right? Highlighting it, or an ASME standard when it comes to creating rigging, right? Or the Canadian standard. So, because remember, it's not just US here, we're talking about it now. And you have to look at what is the overall picture and the intent when it comes to a compliance-based industry. What is the overall picture or intent when it's an excavation or machine guarding? So I tell people, put yourself in any position other than yours. What I mean by that is, if it was your family member saying, what happened to you, right? Or vice versa. So you say, hey, my family member or my friend or my loved one should not have happened because the company should have done this. That's more a macro level decision. Or when the federal government comes in, right? Or when the top management comes in and says, we wrote a policy and a procedure for this. Y'all fail to follow it in the field. We all done when we've all been there, right? When some said, I know I'm guilty of it, before I knew better. We say, well, management is not in tune with what's actually happening. But what happened is that the policies and procedures and the procedural checklist was put in place so that we can safely do our job. It's not always going to be easy, but that's why they were put in place. And if you keep that in mind, what would management say when they look at this in a national investigation report happened or failed? Or what would the government say? Or like I said, right? Or if we're in a helicopter looking down, what would happen? The big picture, not we just tend to look at things in a very microscopic view. That's the best. That's the best. I can tell anybody, when in doubt, always pick the safe answer. You may think it's realistic to think about it. We're talking about Mars. We're talking about the moon. And we're talking about design realistic in the workplace.
One of the things I think advice we've got to wrap this up is don't fear failure.
Absolutely.
Don't fear failure. I was on a thing like ASC here earlier today, and they had a person whose career had been recognized as a fellow of the society. And all the stuff they had to go through to become a fellow of society. Recognized a lifetime of achievement. And they said, look, when I first got to say, I got out of school and all this other stuff, I took CSP 3 times before I passed. And that person is a fellow.
There you go.
So look, don't get me afraid. When I took it out, I'm going to take it out. I'll see what's on it, so I know what to see. That's okay to have that strategy. Stress. You'll eventually get there. Take tips that you were in school or in high school or college, whatever. They apply this well. I tend to go with my first gut instinct. And, so people leave me question and come back to it. Certainly do that. James does do it that way. I never question. I just unanswered, right? I'm going to make a decision. We're moving on. Right or wrong. We're running without the way out, right? That could be a test strategy. But I have had people that work for me that I'm not been successful, but then they see where their decisions are and they go back. Keep learning. Because what's got down in safety, one reason only. We want to bring workers home safe. We want to make a difference in other people's lives. We certainly want to recognize for our career achievements. I do, you do, everybody does. But I think preparing some of these exams helps make you a better safety professional because what you're exposed to outside of your present job scope. If I'm working on gas, working in the refinery, maybe I'm not exposed to things in manufacturing. Maybe I'm not exposed to things in construction. If I'm only working in construction, maybe I don't understand process safety management and how all that works. So I think this makes you a better, well-rounded safety professional. You prepare for this. And most of us are generalists anyway. So it's always good to learn, to know, to gain knowledge. And if first you don't succeed, keep going.
Try again. When you do succeed, don't stop.
Yeah. Continuing education, continuous improvement, right, Dr. Martin? Absolutely agree.
Because the certification doesn't make you a good safety professional. It makes you, in that moment, a person who passed the exam at that qualification level, minimally acceptable candidate for that version of the exam, and nothing more. And so if you stop there and you rest on your laurels and you think that you're just going to get by with a CSP, MSP, STSC, COSM, COS, master trainer, that's not going to work, right? Because your life is long and so is your career. So you got to keep going. But we don't want to keep you way long, Doug, but we do want to point people towards where they can find some of that free stuff you talked about.
Absolutely, Dr. Martin. Before that, let me add these few things, or just recap these few things. I think these are the biggest ones. Because this conversation, honestly, we could have taken hours. We can go so many different directions. First of all, like I said, always for these exams, you should always consider, and you'll see it on the exam, on that those three videos that we have, think environmental, then health and safety. Because environmental has to come first. Also, many people aren't sure if they have the experience or not to apply for some of these exams. There's obviously an educational requirement, but there's also an experience requirement. I tell people, don't get confused between safety title and safety responsibilities. We all have safety responsibilities, doing hazard assessments, school inspections, and equipment materials. And the BCSP recognizes safety experience, not necessarily safety title. So I tell many people that I've had people that are attendants, right? Confined space watches, fire watches,
firefighters, EMTs, police officers, military personnel.
Thank you very much, Dr. Martin. And I think that's important to know because many people think they're not included or they're precluded from this, but they're not. We have to, even for our resumes, we should be looking at say EHS experience, not EHS title. Okay. Responsibilities that we've had. Also, James, like you said, answer the question and never leave a question blank on the exam. If you leave it blank, you will miss that question. At a minimum, take a guess. And then the last thing, like you said, is don't fear failure. Worst case scenario, you fail the exam, and Dr. Martin, like you were saying, they'll tell you what domains you have to work on the most, right? And James, if they pass it, you got the credential. And going back to exactly what Dr. Martin said, keep investing in yourself, keep investing in more training, more credentials.
And by the way, you're going to have to, for most credentials, you have to have continuing education.
Absolutely. And I think the BCSP, I think it's a great organization. I think it's great people, right? I think that, don't get me wrong, like any of us, sometimes we overshoot the mark, sometimes we undershoot the mark, and I think it's a little question issue here, a question issue there, but the biggest thing, they are really, all these organizations that we spoke about, Veriforce, right? Alliance, y'all's programs, our programs, right? NCCR, they're all for the betterment of the industry. And ultimately, in the end, what is it? To keep employees safe, right? And bring us home safely. That's it. It's always the same goal. Dr. Martin, as far as the videos, the easiest thing people can do is if they go to YouTube, they can either search just BCSP prep, right? Or it doesn't matter, ASP prep, CSP prep, CHST prep. So they can search BCSP prep, or our call sign is channel4training.com. So the number 4. So channel 4 training. I'm sorry, just channel 4 training. That's our handle on YouTube.
Channel 4 with the number?
Yeah, so channel CHANNEL 4 training.
How about if they Google on YouTube Doug Castro? Will they get something there too?
Probably, but then again, they might catch me after like a bad Saints game one day. No telling what they're going to say, So.
Hey, listen, everything is a wormhole, right? It might get you to Channel 4 training. You never know. So thank you for coming on, Doug. We really appreciate all your wisdom. And we appreciate your participation on the Veriforce Strategic Advisory Board. I know James does, as the chair of that prestigious organization. I'm going to let James take us out because I know he wants to give another shout out to that big event we got coming up.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug, for coming.
Thank you.
I know that's going to help. That advice is very sound. I know others that it's helped. And I will just say this. For those of you that have taken tests and that have achieved a milestone in your career, don't forget how you got there. Help other people, man. Help other people. And Doug certainly
Turn the elevator back down.
That's right. That's
Great
right.
point.
So
Great.
want to end on this again. The Risk Matrix podcast powered by Veriforce will be live May 15th, 16th down in NOLA at the historic Higgins Hotel for the Veriforce Select Client Series. If you remember the Veriforce Network, check your inboxes. You probably have an invitation there. If not, for all of you that like our podcast, our video cast, hey, continue to follow us there on YouTube. That live event will be on YouTube or on Spotify. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, get down in the comments. Let's get after it. But whatever you do, keep bringing those workers home safe from high hazard jobs.